pills all night. And I'm all messed up, I'm so out of me. Stilettos and broken bottles.
Oh, Jake's back for the Philly song this time. How's it going, Jake? Welcome back. You were groaning that I put that on again.
I was like, oh, it's another sports thing that I don't know anything about.
Well,
it's going to be some neat Philadelphia American sport thing that I'm just like clueless about. And
but you did love the last time I did this, so.
Well, the song was pretty rocking.
Yeah, that'll come back. Don't worry. Things that also come back. Roland Miller is back on the show. The second time. How's it going?
Good. Thanks for having me back.
We're excited. We've got the new book sitting here on the desk in the B-Cam. We always got a B-Cam slot. You know, it's going to be a good show. So we'll crack into that. In a minute, but
crisp cover, I have to say. It looks like it's a very professionally made book.
Wait till you see the secrets within. So
okay,
I'm excited. How was your little stint away from the show there, Jake?
It was great. Yeah, I had my mom was visiting me from Canada. I was doing all this Dia de Muertos stuff here in Mexico. It was the first year back post COVID, so there was like a whole bunch of crazy activities, and it was super wild and fun. And I had a blast. It's a great week to take off. I might do this every year. We'll see.
I guess I should have pulled up those pics. I feel like that's some content.
Oh, yeah. Put a few pictures up there. You can see me in face paint. You got that one up there? What do you got? There I am. Ooh. Look at that.
The glasses make that picture, by the
way. I had to be able to see the parade, so I couldn't just. So
my son Will was loving this because he's all about Coco, and he was like, "Oh, like Coco," and I was like, "It's exactly like Coco, actually." Yes.
Literally, yeah. I was worried about the paint because I was like, I wanted to, have a drink and stuff. And I was like, am I just be drinking paint like as this rubs off? But this stuff was wild. It like dried into like this like very thin kind of crust, and it was like you could touch it and it wouldn't smear or anything. It was pretty cool paint. Maybe it's like just real makeup, and I have no idea because I don't wear it.
It's your first experience doing that.
So,
well, did you bring any fun drinks back?
Not too much. No, I'm taking it easy today. I just have some pineapple coconut juice with a little bit of dark rum in it. So I'm just being like super chill,
Sounds it. I mean, it sounds fairly fancy. But I guess that's like you've now hit cruising altitude on your cocktail fanciness that it's like just whipping up a little something here. So
yeah, that's how. So
Roland, what did you bring today?
My sister-in-law Kathy bought me this beer, and I thought it would be an appropriate. It's Space Goat from Big Sky Brewing in Missoula, Montana.
Ooh,
it's a pale ale. It's kind of hoppy for a pale ale, but it's good.
Space Goat.
I have it in a space glass here.
Oh shit! I
think this is one of those
nice
kids' jelly glasses. Yeah, it's got all kinds of rockets and stuff.
That's legit. I'm making a gin and tonic right now because it took me too long to set up my B-Cam. So I didn't get to make it before the show. So I'm going to put that on hold for a second. Well, no. You know what? I'm not going to show the book yet while I make my gin and tonic. We're going to talk about where this book came from because I feel like there's some interesting story behind this. The story behind the last one that you were on a couple months ago with me and Tim Dodd.
Back in January.
Yeah, and we were talking about the work that you did with basically being a remote photographer from here to the ISS and all sorts of stories. And then we talked about Abandoned in Place. This one's got a different tack to it. So I'd love to hear where the idea of this book came from.
Well, so when I was doing the book with Paolo, when we were doing that, I did a Kickstarter to help. It's kind of the best way I can make money off some of the books, at least up to that point. And I got contacted. I was getting a lot of media contacts when we were promoting that, and I got contacted by this one company that I thought was just another. They wanted an interview or something, and I wrote back and said, "Sure, let's do it this time." And I was, and then I went back and reread the email, and they were actually a publisher who thought I didn't have a publisher. And so I wrote back and said, "Oh, I'm sorry. I think you think I need a publisher, and I thought you were a media outlet." so we can just cancel it. She goes, well, let's just, why don't we just talk anyway? So I said, okay. So I talked with them, and she said, well, what other space book ideas do you have? And I said, well, I've had this idea to do a book of, it started out years ago, like decades ago. It's like the best 100 photographs of the space shuttle. And that morphed into, when they finished the program, well, maybe I could do like one photograph from every mission, that was like the best. And then that kind of morphed into this book, which has a lot more writing than I normally do. And it doesn't necessarily have a picture it has a picture from almost every mission. There's a couple from certain missions, but it basically tells the story of the program through each mission, through a photograph, and then some writing about the mission, some of the highlights. So it was really fun to do. But you're right, it's very different. Where my other books are kind of art-based books. It's about, one photograph on every page with a caption, and that's generally it. Where this is the book itself, I think it's kind of an art piece on its own. The press, Artisan Press, that published it, did a beautiful job designing it. Nina Simoneau was the designer, and she just did a fantastic job. So it really kind of grew out of that mistake, happily.
The scheduling mishap.
I may have said this before, but my mom would say to me, you have more luck than sense, and that's so true all the time. So
all right, so before I open this up, my headcanon was that this was going to be an Orbital Planes book, but I think that already exists, and I'm one Roland book behind in my library behind me.
Shoot, okay.
So I need to update that. So can you tell me about Orbital Planes and give me some context so I know how to think about all these?
So I was a photography professor, and then I kind of accidentally became a dean when we'd had 6 deans in 6 years, and they asked me to be the interim dean, and that lasted I got the permanent job, and I was dean for a total of 10 years. So I didn't have a lot of time to do photography, to work on a book. I did Abandoned in Place during that time, and I would stay up till midnight, 1 o'clock, night after night, which you can only do for so long. So I had all this work. I'd shot all this stuff for the space shuttle. I thought I'd really, it'd be great to do something with this. So Damiani Editore, the publishers of Interior Space, I approached them with this idea, which they really liked. So that resulted in Orbital Planes, which is a book it's really all my photographs of the Space Shuttle program, different aspects of it. You guys can see some of these. Let's see if I can hold this up. I don't have a B cam. Sorry, I'll have to fake the B cam. And it's photographs of the orbiters, but I also did work at a bunch of the different, did the kind of the OPFs, to try to document the overall thing as much as possible. This is out at Palmdale. This is Stennis Space Center. That's actually the
like the structural test article thing?
Propulsion test article, which they
Super
took
cool.
down. They were actually taking that apart while I was there. They stopped working on it so I could make a few photographs, which is nice. Photographed
Give me a minute to get in there.
Yeah. They're always really, that was the one where I told that story in, I think, in Abandoned in Place, where we saw them do a main engine test for the shuttle, and the next day we were up on that B1, B2 test stand, which is massive. It's just the most amazing thing. And they were checking the engine out, and then over the intercom we hear this, well, somebody please bring Bubba the test results from yesterday's firing. Somebody please bring Bubba the test results. And we're like, Bubba the rocket scientist. Where else but, Alabama or Mississippi?
Yeah, that's like a mascot, Like, it's not
perfect.
the real name.
And then we met Bubba. Bubba came by while we were looking. He was a really nice guy, really smart, wearing a camo jacket, of course, but, it just, breaking the stereotypes, which is great. So it was really, so it was really, amazing to do that work. And I concentrated on the last 5 years of the program. And then the decommissioning of the orbiters. And so I got to go in the 3 remaining orbiters and photograph inside and out. It was, and so that's all. Everything in that is my photography. While the Space Shuttle, the new book, nothing is my photography. Not a single one of those photographs are mine. So it was more editing, picking out. I looked through probably 750,000 photographs to 1,000,000. I quit counting after about 500,000 because it was, I just thought this is silly. So just looking at, not, just looking at a lot of thumbnails and stuff, but still just to try to find stuff.
That's
that's how that kind of came about.
Was this like, for that amount of photos, were you going somewhere to get access to like a full library, or were you scraping through NASA.gov? Because that sounds like a slog if that's what you were doing.
Well, my plan was to go to the National Archives and go to any NASA archives I could get to, but it was right in the thick of COVID. So the archives were shut down. You couldn't get in. So I did it all online.
This is how you really had nothing to do during the pandemic. Your pandemic hobby was going through NASA.gov and Flickr.
It was. I mean, it actually, I feel a little guilty because I just kept kind of doing the stuff I was doing during most of that. But NASA has they've got these old kind of legacy sites that some of them are still out there, and they've got their sites on the their media platform, and then they've got their whole Flickr thing, which I'm not sure why they went to that, but there isn't one, and then a lot of stuff in the National Archives, and there's there's all these weird little So my goal was to get the highest quality originals I could, which took a lot of, I'd find an image, and there were a few that I just couldn't find anything that was high enough quality, so I couldn't use them. But for the most part, I was able to find things. And then I, quote unquote, remastered them. So I processed them to clean them up and fix the color. Because some of the scans, a lot of it was shot on film, the early part of the shuttle program. So, the scans weren't always as accurate or as sharp as it could be. So that was part of my goal too, was to clean things up as best I could, and make a really beautiful product.
Yeah, my gin and tonic's done, so I'm ready to go to it. But Jake has questions. No, you go ahead. What's your questions? Let's talk more story before we get into it.
That must have been an interesting post-processing situation, because the shuttle spans such a large period of time that the look of the images would be so different in the 80s and the 90s and the 2000s.
And you can see a little bit of that in the book. Where they're grainy and they're not as sharp, and the digital images for the most part, especially toward the end of the program, were much better. They just resolution of cameras kept getting better, and so it all it improved. But I wanted to try to without changing, quote unquote, the image information, make them look as good as I could. So I was happy with how that worked out.
We have Kurt in the chat with some Roland prints on the wall, which is awesome.
Yeah.
So this book, by the way, it comes in a little box of its own, which I find delightful, especially looking through the window at Bruce McCandless, which is great. So you get the nice reveal of him in space, which is pretty awesome. I don't know, what's the deal with these little box things?
Oh, the slipcover. This publisher's done some other books. They did a book called A Man in His Car and a book called A Man in His Watch, which have beautiful slipcovers. So I think they just like that presentation. It's really a beautiful way to get the book, and it protects the book. It's a nice, it's a nice, classy kind of.
Yeah,
I'm not sure I was worthy of a slipcover, but I'll take it. It was fun. Again, the design team was just fantastic.
Yeah, I started flipping through this book, and even I showed Jake a little bit earlier. We were chatting, and he was like, "Oh, that looks like an Anthony book in terms of design," because I love these. The way it's broken up is the different phases of shuttle history. With this, I mean, it looks a lot better in person than in my crappy B cam here on my desk. But, I mean, you broke it up into sections that feel like the right kind of breaking it up. But what went into figuring out phases of the shuttle program that you wanted to highlight?
That to me, that's always the structure of a book. It's tricky because you want to do it so it makes sense and it flows properly, and you don't have a tiny little chapter and then a huge chapter. So I just looked, I kind of had an idea, like I kind of first looked to major events, like what are some major events, like the Challenger accident, the ISS construction, John Glenn's return to launch, and it happened to work out where those really kind of broke it out into fairly even sections, and things kind of shifted after the end of each chapter. There was something generally that shifted into a kind of a new phase of the shuttle program. So I was, I just sat down and did it, and I tried a couple different things, but it became pretty obvious how I wanted to do it pretty quickly. It's and of course the free flight test, that's a shorter chapter because there were just 5, and I felt they had to be kind of on their own. But it just it's just a matter of thinking it through. And that's a really good question, because I think that makes a big difference in how you portray it. And there's still every mission is still in sequence. So it wasn't. I remember with Abandoned Place struggling literally for years while I was working on the photography. Like, how am I gonna do this? Because there was stuff that didn't fit into Mercury, Gemini, Apollo. There was stuff that I wanted to show that just. And I finally realized if I did it by the rocket program and not the crewed program, I could work it out. So that's how I did that. So it's just I was like woke up at like 4 a.m. figuring that one out. My subconscious is way smarter than my conscious mind, which may not be saying much, but.
I found it interesting on the there's so people understand there's every single mission has some written content about it as well, in addition to the pictures that you selected. Did you try to work through each mission in terms of like what was the particular theme of this mission, or like the notable unique element? I noticed like the ones that were DoD missions. I was just flipping through one a second ago that was like a DoD mission, and it's like, I guess I'll talk about solid rocket boosters this time, because there's like nothing to talk about. Here's the one. It's like, it's a DoD mission. Here's a picture of the Cape and solid rocket boosters, because that we got nothing.
Well, people, there's a little bit of information about some of those, but for the most part, all those DoD missions are still classified. And people have conjectured, and they probably have figured out exactly what some of them are. But to me, it was like, this is a book. This isn't, if I put something in there that isn't right, it's wrong forever. And I'm sure there's some mistakes somewhere in this. I have no doubt, because it's a lot of information. But to consciously say, well, I'm going to guess, because this guy says they did this, I'm just not going to say any of it. And I wanted to talk about those other things anyway. So it was a great, I'm glad you picked up on that, because that was a very conscious decision, again, kind of out of the gate. How am I going to handle that? So I thought, well, I can talk about some of the main elements of the system and how it worked, and highlight those instead of just saying, leave a blank page there. It seemed kind of. It kind of killed 2 birds with one stone. Yeah. I could have redacted the whole thing, because it would have had it redacted in white on the black pages. But yeah,
it's weird. STS 92 is about ITAR. What a weird thing to pick.
Yeah.
I do just want to give a little love to the West Coast launch site. Maybe like the most, one of the biggest bummers of the program that nothing flew out of there. Just the red launch towers are such a vibe. Like, there's nothing that sets the scene for the red launch towers of, the 80s, 70s and 80s space infrastructure. So good. So good.
When you try to go through and pick photos, like one thing that I come across just in like sort of like trying to find pictures of rockets is like there's like a few like kinds of shots. Like there's like some like pretty common shots, like the liftoff with the smoke coming out the side. You have like the really, really wide shot where like you have the arc of the solid rocket exhaust and the shuttle at the top, and, all these different kind of shots that we've seen a few different times. How did you like decide, okay, well, this shot is good for STS whatever, and now I can't use it for the other ones, because then it would be like looking at the exact same picture even though they're different flights? Like, did you have to make some weird decisions about that?
Yeah, so what we did was I really worked with the designer, where I gave her like 3 to 5 pictures for every mission, and then we kind of worked through what would work best and the whole thing. Like there's 2 pictures of the external tank floating after it was released, and I wasn't sure about that, but I think they work in the context of the design of the book. But yeah, and I did put in some, there's a few kind of standard pictures, but I tried to find something that related to the mission specifically, but not make that a very literal thing in every one. So sometimes I'll be talking in the text about something and the picture is something totally unrelated. But other times I'm talking about something and the picture does relate to that. So it wasn't a firm and hard rule to go either way with that. It's just kind of what felt good, and to give a variety and to also show you, I didn't want to do simply a greatest hits, but then there's some pictures that need to be like the Bruce McCandless picture. How can you do a book on the shuttle and not show that, and some other ones. So it's partly greatest hits, but then with some less known images. Yeah.
Turn off this light. I'm getting too much glare over here. There we go. Yeah, I love the free floating external tanks though. That always looks rad. I don't know why you're doubting that. That's always a cool part of.
I'm not. It's just something. And there's a lot of pictures of things in the payload bay, but that's partly because that's the only place they could really photograph things is from the flight deck, looking out the back window. So
and those Canadians put that Canadarm logo right in the way there.
Yeah.
Was that you? I think you were telling us that story.
Blame Canada. Blame Canada. Sure. Yeah.
I'm trying to find some other ones that were related. But so you wrote all the blurbs about each.
Yeah.
That's a book in its own. Like you did 2 books in one book.
It was. Yeah. And the thing you have to understand is I was working on orbital planes at the same time. So I just want to say I don't recommend that. It's a little.
You're doing 3 books at once.
Schizophrenic. Yeah.
Well, that's an interesting like collision between those things though. Because you're doing a work that you are so intimately familiar with, like being where each one of these photos was taken, and I'm sure that puts some perspective on, that's an interesting part of the space shuttle. I wonder if I can find something like that in a mission context. Is that some of the interplay that you had between the books?
Yeah. So it was nice because, like when I was photographing the shuttle, my goal is to try to generally not do what other people are doing. Now there's certain photographs, you walk up on the launch pad, you see the shuttle against a bright blue sky. You're like, well, I have to photograph that. I just have to, it's just a beautiful object. I'm not going to not. So there's some of that, but my work, I get a little more into the abstract. I do some, see if I can find one in orbital planes that's a little more in that vein. So, I'm trying to do, whereas with so here's the one. So, when you see that, you kind of have to take that picture. If you walk by that and say, oh, I've seen that before. It's kind of in your bones. But then the opposite page is this one of, if I can do this side with my mic here, the back wall of the payload bay. And so that, just a little more detailed shot, and some are more, even more abstract than that, like this one of the side of the shuttle with the T-0 umbilicals.
Oh, yeah. That's always a fun spot to go to the museums and look at what's going on in that part of the space shuttle, because
and so that to me is about the design. And I would always think, no matter what part of the space program I was photographing, like I remember like the launch umbilical towers, like somebody had to lay out where every little pipe and every little wire and all this stuff went. The same thing with that. Somebody at some point had to decide, well, we're going to have 27 ports, and this one's going to go here, and this one's going to be this big. And it's like, who does, I can't decide what shirt to put on for a, so who's, and I know they use math and science to do it, thankfully, but.
Yeah, but there's somebody out there still mad that their port was on the run side and they should have been on the left side because I had to cut all the way across all that hardware, and they're still pissed off about it, 40 years later.
Pipe 30 feet.
Yeah.
True. We've all been in those meetings. So yeah, we're but so then looking at all these pictures, so I wanted to try it's a little bit like interior space in the fact that I was directing Paolo, but I wasn't physically making the photographs. Here I wasn't directing anybody or making the photographs. So, I wanted to try to show things, to show as complete a picture of what went on as I could. So that was really the plan there, and tied into the design. Again, the book itself is an object and sort of makes it really beautiful. And Nina did, just a fantastic job with, our back and forth on what to do with things. And I deferred to her because the other books, for the most part, I laid out the order of the photographs, and I didn't do the design work of the font and other things, but the actual order of the pictures, for the most part, was me. And this one, the order was dictated by the mission, so it was not the same. But she also put pictures on opposing pages, and just had a whole different feel than I could even comprehend. So I deferred to her design knowledge.
That's really cool. I was thinking those close-up shots that you have, like that's what I do when I go see a shuttle. Like if I go to, the Kennedy Visitor Center, you walk in, you take in the whole thing, and you kind of drink that up. But then you go and you just stand as close as you can at it for half an hour, and you just look at like stitches and nuts and bolts and a wire that goes up like this with a little piece of tape holding it up, and then a little joint here. Like those are the fun kind of the hidden beauties of these incredibly complex machines. Like these
yeah.
I can't think of many machines that are more complex than a space shuttle orbiter, right? So
no, that and the weird thing when I was photographing the shuttle, this is kind of hard to explain, but I would refer to my work as this documentary abstract combination. So I'm doing some of the shots like the shuttle against the blue sky. Then I'm doing the team on a zero umbilical cord, which is much more abstract and out of context, although it still documents what that was. But to me, it's more about the design and the visual relationships. But after a while, not from the visual part of it, from the technical part of it, like the abstract and the documentary kind of flipped, because if I looked at a little piece like the T-minus zero umbilical port, I could understand, okay, yeah, I get how that works and but if you step back and look at the whole thing, it's like, this is overwhelming. How does this thing all, how on earth,
this fly?
Pun intended, do they get this thing to fly? Yeah, exactly. So that was, I tried to include a little bit of that subtly in both books, actually.
I have stumbled upon a photo of Mir from the space shuttle that is like, I don't think I've ever seen this particular angle before. And I feel like these are the ones that you probably were in the depths of NASA.gov.
Yeah.
Holy crap.
Going to, and it, there was a lot of stuff that I would have liked to have used, but especially a lot of the early film stuff, it just wasn't high enough quality, or it was out of focus a little bit, or there was something, and I could have done this book 1,000 different ways and with 1,000 completely different photographs. So it was not that I didn't have anything to choose from. There was so much to choose from. What are you going to do? And so you again, think about the overall story you're trying to tell, and pick out photographs that fill in gaps. And that was really the, things that it's like, wow, I've followed this for, decades, and I didn't know that thing was that, so you just kind of have to let it wash over you, and then kind of see where things fall.
Yeah, man, I'm just thinking that shuttle Mir part of shuttle history is like, I feel like that's a really forgotten part of the history. We don't seem to talk about it a lot, but like shuttle went to Mir a bunch of times.
Yeah.
And like there was American astronauts staying on Mir and everything. Yep. It was really like proto ISS.
Yep, I agree completely, and I learned a lot. I knew a lot about the shuttle, but I learned a ton doing this, and that was one of the things. I think there were 9 shuttle missions to Mir, 7 docks, and there were 7 astronauts, if I'm remembering correctly, close to that anyway. And it was really a critical part of working out what the ISS would be. I mean, that was really part of it. We wanted to see get more experience, and thankfully we were getting along with the Russians at the time, and it worked out, plus the crazy crash and the fire, and just, there were some just, we're lucky that, the whole thing didn't just blow up at some point. They that one.
Yeah, I like watching
and I talk about those things because, and I agree completely. I think that Mir, that's why I wanted it to be one of the beginning. I think it's the beginning of chapter 4, because I think I agree completely. I think its importance in what came from there is overlooked to a great extent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It was go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, I was to say there's all these great videos mirror of the Americans going through it and showing the station off, and the hatches are so small because they're all the like kind of that older Soyuz style hatch to connect all the modules, and they have all this tubing running through it, and so like you kind of have to like really like force yourself through the hatches, like kind of slither through like smoke, and there's so much storage. It was so cluttered, like it was very very not a great place to live long term, I don't think so. Thinking about improvements to especially the U.S. segment where they had the bigger modules in the hatches, right? And was a big deal.
What have you seen the photographs of the Chinese station, which looks so that I've seen this several times online where it's a picture of which all the walls are white and perfectly clean, and then they show the Destiny module with just wires and stuff everywhere, and it's like, oh. And somebody's like, cable management. I mean, cable management, that means you got to go into that wall and redo all those cables. I don't think it wasn't like it was an accident, You don't want to have to dig in. I don't know, I don't know what the context is of that picture of the nice clean Chinese station, but I don't think it's necessarily a good thing. I think, it's like, oh, cable management, like cable.
I think mostly it's that they just haven't started yet, because like this is when they were unpacking it, and there was just like shit everywhere. It looks like you're moving into your new house and you haven't unpacked anything yet. Yeah, it's like
exactly. Yeah, I mean, just wait a few years and we'll see how that looks. But if they
that's
have to
gonna
go
be my favorite thing to
track. So the ISS, it looks crazy, but it's very functional. It's very it works very well. I mean, they do have to manage all those cables. Paulo, when he was photographing, he talk about how you can't just, put a tie wrap on one because it'll just still spread out. They have plastic bags they shove all the cables into when they're not using them, so they're not just flying out everywhere. So.
Right. Were there other things that you were big surprises learning about the shuttle as you went through this project? Like any other big wow, I had no idea that was a thing?
I think the number of foreign, international, I shouldn't say foreign, but international astronauts who participated, it was really phenomenal. The number of countries, the number of people, and we had, Germany basically controlled the D1 and the D2 mission. They were dedicated to pretty much German things. Which was great. And of course, the shuttle program was the beginning of diversifying the astronaut corps, and that I think was a really important thing. And I did try to highlight that without hitting people over the head, to show that diversity, especially with women in their roles. So I think those were two of the things that, especially the number of international astronauts that really flew on it. It was the other thing I think that surprised me was the close calls they had with tile damage. I mean, STS-27, probably had more tile damage than STS-107 Columbia. It was just not in as bad a place, but it was. They lost a complete tile, but it happened to be over an L-band antenna where the aero body of the shuttle was thicker, so it didn't burn through. I mean, and then there were some. After Columbia, there were other, there were just a lot of, there was some, like if STS-27 had been lost, well, that would have, it was 2 missions after Challenger. That would have been it. There's no way they would have kept flying. And then we wouldn't have an International Space Station, or we wouldn't have had one as soon as we.
And 26 also had tile issues, same deal. And then 27 had it the worst. Yeah. It's just like, that moment is so fickle that and they didn't actually solve the issue.
27 was and people got so mad. And again, like I always say, I don't want to start any wars with the shuttle lovers, but people got. I remember people during the last launches just so upset. Why are they ending this? This is a great thing. Why are they doing this? And it was a great thing, but that's a problem they couldn't fix. And they were going to lose another shuttle. And to do it now with the kind of knowledge they had would have just been criminal. At that point. So it was sad, but hopefully better things will come from,
Yeah.
Well, and then,
But what do you
I mean,
think-
even on that point, wasn't it I just pulled it up, thanks to your wonderful writing, that, yeah, the mission after 107, yet again, they had more foam come off, and it just happened to miss the shuttle that time.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I remember
yeah.
that
So-
one. I think I read a Wayne Hale post about that they, like, had, determined what was causing the foam to break, and then they realized, like, soon after, actually, we didn't solve that at all, and it was the fact that they were filling and draining certain tanks so much that it would start cracking. Makes you think. Makes you think.
Yeah, and they-
There's no
yeah.
shuttle-derived tanks that keep getting filled and drained, right? It's a little
Yeah.
stressy, but yeah, weird.
Yeah.
So
So
this shot is spectacular. This is my non sequitur at the moment. Like, maybe this is a good time to talk about something that I read in the acknowledgement section, that you talk about how you're almost unable to find who took any of these pictures.
Yeah,
I'm curious to hear about that a little bit.
well, there's so many good photographers like Kim Shiflett and oh gosh, I can't even think of Ben Cooper. I don't know who was taking all these. Bill Ingalls, great NASA photographer, but only in rare cases do they list who the photographer is in the data, and so it was just really impossible to credit people. So we knew who some of the astronauts were that that took the pictures, but I think Hoot Gibson take the man maneuvering unit pictures? I think he did.
I think that's right. Yeah.
There's, but and I credited some of the astronauts because it was known, but I'm one of my concerns, and it's one of the reasons I didn't include any of my photographs. I had a couple I probably could have used, but I just wanted to keep a clean break between orbital planes and this. I did, and I've already seen some press about it where they say Roland Miller's photography. I'm like, no, it's not my photography. It's not.
I didn't go to space on every single shuttle mission.
None of them. Right. None of them. Yeah. Well, that's I remember when I was teaching at Brevard Community College, I had a still frame poster up in my office of a shot from an IMAX camera in the back of the payload bay, and people go like, "Oh, did you take that?" I'm like, "Yeah, I took that. Sure, I was up on the last time. What do you think?" No. So people just
like, if I took that, don't you think there would be more pictures of me in space around here? Or do you think that's the
Yeah.
one I would have hung up?
Yeah. So yeah, exactly.
You got to get like some stable
yeah.
diffusion going and be like Roland on STS 118, and get yourself some AI generated Roland in space and hang it around, see if people fall for it.
Yeah. they might. The back to the credit. I wish in a perfect world there would be one NASA website with access to every single image, and it would have the photographers, it would have all the information, like the whole Flickr thing when they shifted to putting a lot of stuff on Flickr. I mean, nothing against Flickr, but it doesn't seem like the right platform for that. It's just not the same thing. And so if there was, if I had a magic wand that could fix it all, I'd just collect it all in one spot, make sure everybody's getting credit for the work they did. But maybe someday that'll occur.
I feel like that's just like a perennially underfunded NASA history office project, totally should exist, and I just don't know if they're ever going to peel a couple of dollars off for that.
No,
thing.
Well, and not just history, but also the media people should, and that's, I think part of the problem is, I don't really know, but I would assume that there's different entities that have different sites, and that's why it's kind of all spread out.
Yeah. It's interesting though, right? Because so much, like everything that comes out of a NASA camera is public domain. So it's not like they have rights management to battle, which is good. It's just almost a cataloging issue at that point, especially with.
It should get better now. Like now that we're a little more digital than we were in the 80s and 90s, right?
Well, and maybe I'm just not hip on Flickr, but I just found that really.
Roland hates Flickr. Is what we're discovering.
No, I don't hate Flickr. No, nothing. It's just that other people were posting their pictures and stuff. Well, wait a minute. I couldn't even tell it. I probably don't get it. I'm an old, dadgummit.
It's so funny because I went multiple episodes of this show going on and on about how good Flickr is these days for space photography because and it's honestly because bizarrely like all the space agencies are on it for no reason. Like I don't know why everyone, but it's only almost like it's almost the only photo platform that has sustained being a photo platform for, I mean at this point 25 years. Like, I don't even remember when Flickr was founded, but I don't remember my life before Flickr. You know, like, it's been around that long. So it just...
Dadgummit, I do.
It was a better time. It was a better time back then.
The reason I say that, to be clear about it, is like when you go to the National Archives, they'll have the date, they'll have like an identifier number, they'll have a little caption about what it is. Sometimes they'll have a whole bunch of information about what it is. You know, that kind of detail, that kind of level of historical documentation is what I crave. And so I just wish that, you know, I just kind of wish there was one spot where everything was. I know I'm dreaming, but
yeah, I'm sure there's a whole bunch of people at NASA that are like, we would love to do that, please.
Oh,
yes,
I'm sure there
please.
would. Oh, I don't fault them. I think you're absolutely right. I mean, the personnel, just the cost and personnel to do all that. You know, I can't even keyword my own photographs, so I don't know why I'm complaining about NASA, but you know, it's just I have my own filing system which works pretty well, but I'd love to do someday, you know, keyword everything and just be able to go, oh, you want a picture of a green dog? Here, look.
We can maybe apply for like a NASA SIB or something and get a little grant money going, and me and you can collab on this. Maybe Jake and you should, since I love Flickr. I'm a pro Flickr guy over here, but maybe I have an idea. We just get the Flickr team. Hadn't seemed to have pushed out a lot of new features in the last 10 years. Maybe we just shift them over to the NASA side. I don't know.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go. We'll fix it all. We'll get them all straightened out. But there's still an amazing amount of stuff out there too. That's the thing, you know, like especially the National Archives. There's really obscure stuff, and it was fun to just like go through a mission, and there'd be 4,000 pictures from one mission that somebody scanned. Well, maybe 2,000 that they scanned in, you know, that were there, and it's really, you know, interesting to go through. There's a lot of just stuff that wasn't going to work, but it's really, you know, and that gave me this other perspective of everything that went on. You know, when you look at what they did on the missions, they did a lot of stuff with flame experiments in space. They did a lot of stuff with growing crystals. You know, there were some ubiquitous themes that ran through so many of the missions. It was interesting to see how often they would do different but similar experiments.
Yeah.
It was funny in the early days, like how many times they were just spacewalking on a satellite. That's a thing that doesn't happen that much anymore, you know. Like, let me go ride on this satellite for a little bit and see what happens.
My favorite one is
the sail, the for sale
thing. That one. My favorite one is though where it was. I think.
Wait, Jake's getting cut out. What happened, Jake? This one?
Well, no. So that's a classic one because they went and got the two. It was like the two little spinny sats with the star motors that had failed.
Yeah.
So they went and got both. There's another one where they went and it was like a giant, huge satellite. I think it was like an Intel sat. It was very, very big.
It was.
And they had to go.
It was Intel 6, and they grabbed it. They just.
by hand.
Like just at one point there was an astronaut grabbing the entire satellite.
It was STS 49.
Well, this one, 49. Shout out to past guest Christian Fisher's mom, who was driving the arm when they captured this one. That's a good one.
Oh, yeah.
49. Let's get to it. There it is.
Yeah. They kept trying to grab it. You're back one.
No, 40.
Those are the mission numbers. Don't let the mission numbers fool you. Yeah. So, they were trying to grab it with the arm, and it wouldn't engage. So they had one of those experimental platforms. They were trying to build things in space. They took that and made this little platform that wasn't part of the plan. And then the three of them just grabbed it. You know, it's just, you're thinking, man, what if you slice your glove open on something sharp? I'd be like, I don't know if I want to do that. You'd be sailing off.
It's a plot point. If it came up in For All Mankind, people would be like, this is so unrealistic. I mean, I guess it was a plot point in several episodes of For All Mankind. In fairness,
didn't they have a little bike thing or something too? It was like a space bike where they you had like a apparatus that would like mount into the bottom and they were driving.
They had a little. It wasn't. I don't think I don't think you could drive it around, but it would clamp into it, and they kept having trouble with those. You know, they just there. there's a lot of interest. The stuff that was interesting too was like they had a blanket come loose, so one of the astronauts had to go out and stitch it back together. They had the kind of torn solar panel where the guy who was a doctor, he went up and took some basically zip ties and zip tied it back in place and fixed it. But they're doing that stuff. They haven't practiced that. That's me. Everything else they practiced 100 times or more. That stuff was so cool because they're like, well, we got to go do this, and we don't know how it's going to work. And it's no pun intended. It's not necessarily rocket science, but it's such an extreme environment. You need to think through everything you're doing, otherwise you could get in serious trouble. So I was very impressive in their ability to adapt to what was going on.
The improv days of space.
Yeah.
Russians are still doing it.
Yeah. But
Russians,
the early shuttle period though was very much like that. Like up until I guess a lot of it was pre-Columbia, but like that sort of early 80s, 90s ish time when they were still working with a lot of commercial sats, it was a little bit of a funky time. They were trying some stuff. So yeah.
Get all that. Yeah. And the whole concept of it was kind of going to pay for itself with satellite retrieval and that up until Challenger, that they were doing a pretty good job with some of that stuff. I can't imagine, they were charging people what it actually costs to launch a shuttle. But, one of the things I talked about, I didn't really think about this before, and there will certainly be other ways to do it. But, when you use the shuttle, like especially building the ISS, if you use just a regular rocket, you'd have to launch the thing up there. Then you'd have to launch a crew to go connect it to whatever you were building. With the shuttle, you had the crew and the piece, and you could do it all in one shot. And that's, the shuttle was expensive to launch. I'm not sure that there wouldn't have been a cheaper way, but it was certainly an efficient way to do it.
Yeah. It was versatile
that
for
concept,
sure. Stuff, right?
Yeah. The concept that the space station wouldn't exist, or certainly wouldn't have existed as soon as it did without the shuttle, I think is pretty solid. I mean, and that was, again, people that poo-poo the shuttle program, if they had only built the International Space Station, I think it would have been worth it, because it's such an important step in going farther into outer space to learn about microgravity and living in microgravity, that it really allowed that to happen in a way that I think it would have been difficult to do otherwise.
Although there's then the people like me who are mad that shuttle was late, so Skylab died, and we could have had, like, imagine if the shuttle started in the Skylab era, and the first years of shuttle were space station based. It would be really interesting to know
that would have been
what that would have done to the trajectory. And honestly, even what it would have done to the industry, because like you're saying, there was this weird moment when everything going to space from the US was going to go on the space shuttle. We made a national space bus and everything had to catch a ride. Like no other options. Air Force, commercial people, you're all going on there. But if they were busy with Skylab, they wouldn't have really had the bandwidth to do that. And what would that have done? Like, I don't know. That's the missed moment in spaceflight history, as Jake knows, is it's my big thing. Like, and it probably would have also sucked, like, to get down that rabbit hole, right? We would have been stuck on Skylab. We'd all be complaining for years that we were stuck on Skylab. Like, we'd be having the same argument, but I'm just curious if we would have been having the same argument 20 years before we were having the argument.
Yeah. It would have been interesting to see what would have come out of that. And I think Skylab is also greatly overlooked in its role and everything. It was pretty amazing that they were able to do that on such a short time frame and pull that off. And I know there were issues, but it seemed like it was a great beginning for all this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
We still have a Skylab show to do, Jake.
We do have a Skylab show to do. It's wild to think about how close Apollo and Shuttle are in history. Like, just thinking back, what if Shuttle went to Skylab? At first I was like, what do you mean that was a different era? But then I'm like, no,
so was Mir.
There was 6 years between the last Apollo capsule and the first Shuttle. It was not that big of a gap.
Dude, it's 20 years to the day from Yuri Gagarin to the first Shuttle. Is a stat that will always blow my mind.
Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
Because that's one that bums me out. Like, darn. That's ridiculous pace, you know? It's crazy.
Yeah.
So what's next, Roland? Now that you've done 3 books and 2 books, what's the next book? Because clearly you can't just sit still for 10 minutes.
I don't have anything nailed down. I'm working on some.
Skylab.
I would like to call it. Yeah, Skylab. Skylab. We could do this. I'm actually working on a thing that's a little more farther out there. I would loosely refer to it as astrophotography, but it doesn't include any telescopes. I'm doing some images of exoplanets that are obviously I'm not going to exoplanets. So it's a very unique thing I'm doing, and hopefully it'll pan out to be something. It's really fun to do. And it's totally, I can do whatever I want to these images because they're not real. So it's like all the shackles are off. I don't have to worry about what I'm doing. It's kind of we'll see what comes of it. And I'm actually working on a big project here out west on the kind of the status of the West at this point versus the myth of the West. And so that's been really fun and hoping to I still am not getting any cred with NASA lately. So hopefully I can get back. I'm not sure what they want me to do, but I'll just keep doing books on old programs till they let me back.
Things are looking up. I got off the wait list for Artemis 1 as like the little indie podcaster. So maybe there's some movement in this department.
All right. Well, I'll believe it when I see it from my standpoint. But yeah. So, that's that's really it. And just there's so much going on in spaceflight right now. It's I can't even keep up with it. It's just I'm almost glad I don't live down there because I'd feel like I'd have to be out at every single thing, and I'm not sure I could, it's if you've never done a launch at 3:30 in the morning that gets scrubbed a couple times, you just by the third night you're like, oh, I don't know if I can keep this. Moving an hour or whatever later every morning. So not to complain. Yeah. So, but it's just fun. It's really great that so much is going on. I want to get back involved in it as much as I can.
I want to do a real quick plug because Roland won't himself, but I know some friends that have released books, and right now this book comes out next week, right? You're still the 8th, right, November 8th. The 8th, yeah. So if you right now pre-order on Amazon, this is a fun fact about Amazon. If you pre-order, all of those orders get assigned to launch day, which means on November 8th, Roland goes way up the charts. So,
cool.
I do see that he's already the #1 release in aeronautics and spaceflight, so he probably doesn't need much of our help. But if you want this book, and you absolutely should, because it's absolutely glorious and beautifully designed, that's a super cool thing to do, is pre-order it. Unless there's somewhere better that you want them to pre-order it that gives you more money. But
no, that's fine. No, that's fine. And check out Orbital Planes too. It's if you like the more artistic side of it, the writing in Orbital Planes is really my anecdotal writing about my experiences, which are fun. Just a lot of crazy stuff happens when you're at these unusual places. So,
well, I am one Roland book behind, obviously, so I need to get on this as well. So, do it, people. Great books. And the other ones, Interior Space, Abandoned in Place. I could probably grab them off my shelf. Let's see. This one.
It's got the Roland book.
Yeah, I'm flattered. I'm in your background.
You are. Pretty prominent.
I praise.
I don't know why I'm doing this. I have a B cam, for Christ's sake. Abandoned in Place. Amazing book. Interior Space. Jake bought this one for me. We talked about it last time. Still amazing. You got to get all this stuff because it's if you're a nerd, I'm Jake, you're a nerd, you need to have these books. So
I am a nerd.
Yeah, I'll send you them. Little present for Dia de Muertos. So
outrageous shipping costs. It'll be really fun
you're gonna have to go buy that one yourself. Bank off of Jeff Bezos' shipping money on that one. Jake, you put out an episode.
I did, this morning. So I had an interview with Scott Bolton, who is the principal investigator of Juno. So Juno went by Europa last month and did a super cool flyby. You talk about photography. So one of the cool things we talk about is that the spacecraft goes behind Europa from the sun, and so some of the photos are on the night side of the moon, and they were really struggling, like, how do we take pictures of this, because there was just like, it's basically eclipsed. And so they use the star tracker, which is designed to navigate, and it's built around photographing black space and picking out little specks of stars. And so when they turned that camera to Europa, they were able actually to get photographs of the night side. So there's some pretty cool stuff on how they did that in there. It's pretty neat. So yeah, check it out. Talk about one of the coolest moons of Jupiter.
Is this the thing you're talking about?
That's the one. That's it. That's nighttime on the back of Europa. So
wow,
pretty wild.
I don't think we've done that before, right? That seems like a new thing.
Well, they've used this star tracker a couple times already on the mission, so they've done it. But yeah, it's a reasonably weird thing because it's an engineering camera. It's not a science instrument, and so they were able to kind of use it for some different stuff. So
they're so clever.
Rad. Yeah, they are. What about you, Anthony? Got any new stuff out recently?
I'm trying to remember when the last show was. I think I do. I think you still what?
I'm still trying to catch up. I'm trying to see where you are here. Oh yeah, done some Polaris.
Yeah, last week I talked about how I had Jared Isaacman on, and then shortly after last week's show, I had the rest of Polaris Dawn crew on. So Scott Petit, Sarah Gillis, Anna Menon, talking about the mission itself and some of the like more nerdy bits of what they've been training on, and trying to get some information about them about the spacewalk that they don't want to talk about yet because it's all secrets. But I think in reply to a tweet, Jared Isaacman unveiled the call signs for the crew, and I think Anna Menon's, if he put it in the same order that's in the tweet, Anna Menon's is Walker, so I'm going to assume that she's going out on a spacewalk. So I did confirm with them. I did have a gatekeeper segment on each of the shows where I just confirmed with all of them that everyone is doing an EVA because they're venting the entire spacecraft to vacuum. So I just wanted to get ahead of the gatekeeping that happens with these Jared Isaacman missions of like, well, you weren't the first because X, like everyone's doing a spacewalk. They're all vented to vacuum. You go wear a spacesuit in a vacuum and tell me you're not doing a spacewalk. Like, come on.
Yeah.
So that was good. So be there for that content. It's totally worth it. So anyway, Roland, you're the best. Thanks for hanging out with us as always.
Hey, thanks for having me again. Appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Good to meet you, Jake. I missed your last one, but glad you're here this time.
Yeah, I was last time, so we never got to talk, but glad we caught up this time. It's good.
Yeah, I had to bring in the photography ringer of Tim Dodd last time, but
you did, yeah. I don't remember what I was doing. I was away.
You were at a conference.
It's always at a conference. That's what he says. He's just like drinking margs on the beach. All right, everybody. See you later.
Everyone.
Bye.
Thanks.